Are you tired of being tired? Have you ever gotten regular, quote unquote, good restful sleeps? How do you get restful sleeps? Well, I've been struggling with this a very long time. And with my diagnosis, it was discovered that ADHD has a play in it, but there's also our entrepreneurial lifestyle that has that challenge as well. So I've got Mollie Eastman. She's the creator of Sleep is a Skill and also has a podcast on the same topic called Sleep is a Skill. After struggling with her insomnia during international travel, she combined her background in behavioral change with her fascination for chronobiology to create a comprehensive resource for mastering the skill of sleep. And let me tell you, she knows her shit. That's why I've got her here on today. So, Mollie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And I appreciate that generous intro.
Well, it's not generous, it's true. So, you're welcome either way. So,
Well,
actually,
right
I'm
back at
still
you.
working on this. You're
Yeah.
welcome. New skills.
Oh, it's so good. Nailed it.
But the one thing I do want the listeners to understand is you've got a lot of knowledge, you've got a lot of experience, you've done a lot of research, and you've got a very, and you're not following the traditional clinical system as well. So you mixed it up with, I don't know what you want to call it, old stuff, new stuff, but it's definitely unique, but more body centric is what I'm getting. So before I really destroy this for you, can you just give us a little more background of what you know and what you're doing with sleep,
Yeah.
please?
Oh, so well said. Yeah, well, I mean, it came from my own pain point, really. I mean, I was absolutely not expecting to be in the world of sleep until I went through my own period of insomnia. So what that all looked like was I was a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the max. And my husband, who you know, Blake Eastman, we've been
Right.
together for years. And earlier in our relationship, we decided to, I had been a big fan of Tim Ferriss and had read 4 Hour, Work Week years.
Firework. Yeah.
Yeah, and had always wanted to, venture into the digital nomad side of things. We took our businesses on the road, put everything in storage, and then decided to travel. Got a one-way ticket, but at the time we were stressed to the gills. And so that one-way ticket, the first stop we made in Madrid, I had a panic attack that first night and was like, oh my God, did we make a mistake? Like, what are we doing? Just so many things were coming together and we're responsible for, different paychecks and all the things. And so that stress then spilled over into sleep and I was jet lagged.
Mm.
And I'd never, I grew up with not a lot of money, hadn't traveled really before, didn't know how to manage both the jet lag and the stress. And so I started doing everything not to do with the management of that sleep to try to get it back on track. And what that ended up looking like was spilling into periods of insomnia, which is difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And what that spilled into was I went to the doctors while we're traveling all around, bouncing around, and left with various different types of sleeping pills and no real, advice or support on how to really get out of this. And it was a very scary time. And I'd come from a history of family members that had gone down the, pharmaceutical rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And saw what that can really look like. So this was a very scary path that I was going down for me of, well, what's the plan here? And we know that so commonly when people start in on sleeping pills, especially ones in the domain or Z drugs, so those can look like, the Xanax, the Ambien,
Right.
Estes, all those, traditionally they're really meant for short-term use, especially the benzos, short-term use, not this long-term relationship to them. And so, that was the fear for me of, well, I need a plan. And so went, really deep on understanding how can I restore my sleep because it appears as if I'm going to need to do this myself was the message I was getting. And if anyone's listening and they're struggling with their sleep, they should know that gold standard treatment in the United States is supposed to be CBTI, cognitive behavioral
Oh,
therapy.
yeah, that's right.
Yep, CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is supposed to be the first thing that you're offered. It's not always the case, unfortunately, that is, doled out, but that does have high efficacy. So being aware of that is important. But I was, taking these drugs, not getting any better. But what I did discover over a whole long slew of things was absolutely life-changing. And it changed the course of my life. I not only got my sleep back on track, but I would never really identified as being a good sleeper anyway. So I not only was it back on track, but now I got to actually look at optimizing sleep, which I didn't even think was on the table for me. And so, beginning to know life with this level of sleep was just absolutely game changing. So started the company Sleep is a Skill with the argument that how, sleep is actually a skill set in our modern society. And you can get into some of those things that you mentioned that are kind of body based. And, not from a woo perspective, but from a biological hardwired approach of how to support the body's ability to turn on and off at the times we want them to do that.
See, I knew you had a better way of saying it. Biological. That was a tough word for me at the time.
I'm on the heels of moving and I'm like, oh, yeah, so who knows what's coming up. But what's really amazing is that in the course of creating this company, began to develop some particular niches. So I work with high stakes poker players, especially, and I always mention them because they are the epitome of people that are really outside of the,
You mean the 4 days of straight poker playing is not an ideal sleep scenario?
In a casino designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm, no windows, blue lights, stimuli going nuts. It's just a mess. And yet we can even support them in getting optimized sleep. So if we can work with them, which are essentially shift workers, amped up and all kinds of stuff, we can support just about anyone. And that does spill into the work that we do with a lot of entrepreneurs as well, because, same high stakes situations and stressors that can come about. And lastly, I'll say that ADHD is something that I actually see quite commonly as it relates to the entrepreneurial journey and the complementary nature that we might see with ADHD leaders and how that does then tend to spill into sleep. So we know there's one study that points to 25 to 50% of people with ADHD experiencing some sort of sleep disturbances or difficulties. And that can look like sleep disorders, that can look like poor quality sleep and beyond. So there's a real interplay here between ADHD and sleep that will be really interesting to get into.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like I've shared with you many times. I've never had really good restful sleep unless I did some massive physical labor all day in the very, very hot where your body shuts down, I guess, to a certain extent. But the day-to-day, life to life, I've never had a good sleep. So I've had a lot of misconceptions as a kid, as an adult, especially as an entrepreneur. So in your experience, what is the biggest misconceptions of sleep that entrepreneurs have? And like the one that comes is like, the more we work, it's almost like a bragging right that we can actually just sleep 2-3 hours and still get up and go. So what misconceptions are there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you nailed one of the biggest ones right there of the ability to kind of run on empty and run on, low numbers. That's a clear one. I'd also say too, now this could be subjective or, up for debate, but the concept that many, to be an entrepreneur, you might really require a bit of an optimistic way of thinking. And might see a lot of people saying, oh, no, my sleep's great. Like nothing to worry about, nothing to look at there. The one I see a ton is, I'm a great sleeper. I fall asleep the minute my head hits the pillow, which actually is a big red flag for us that something could be going on with your sleep. So if you are someone that can sleep anytime, anywhere, and we hear that from people a lot, often those entrepreneurs that maybe are jet setting and, jumping time zones or whatever, we actually don't want to hear that because that can be a sign of sleep deprivation. And so maybe we're not getting the amount of sleep that we need, or sleep disorders. And it's important to note that there's over 100 sleep-wake disorders. And because of that, we want to be aware that many people are running around undiagnosed. That's another important talking point too, the need for, I see a future where everyone's tested for sleep disorders because certainly entrepreneurs and, the entire population is underdiagnosed.
Yeah. And it's like for me, mild sleep apnea on my sides, but severe on my back. That made a big change in my sleep. Still not ideal, but a lot better, instead of waking up every day because I'm choking.
Oh my God.
Or every hour because I'm choking, not sleeping.
How are you treating that now?
A CPAP machine. So I look like Darth Vader.
Oh, right. You were okay. Got it. Yeah, the CPAP can make such a difference. And there's so many things now on the table in case anyone's listening and like, oh, I won't wear the mask or, I don't want to find out what it is. Or
get over yourself. Just put the damn mask on. No one sees you at night anyways.
Exactly. And not only too, do we have the mask, we have also new things that we can bring in depending on your severity. We have things like Excite OSA, which is a TENS unit for your tongue, essentially.
Yeah.
Uh, so we've got that. We've got kind of laser treatment. We've got palate expansions. We've got things that can expand your nasal passageways. There is a ton that we can do nowadays.
And the one big change for me with my sleep was actually weight. My weight.
Oh, yes.
I
Well,
found once my neck fat kind of went away,
yes.
that was a big change too.
You've probably seen that was hit the news that things like Ozempic and some of these peptides for weight loss are now being approved for use for sleep apnea. So
no way.
yeah,
Let's look into that. I got the two. I'm diabetic and apnea, so
there you go. Well,
I
and
didn't
also,
realize that.
yeah, and there's nuance to sleep apnea too. And there can certainly be slender people that get and have sleep apnea.
Yeah.
But you're right, there is a prevalence too that there's an interconnection with weight as well.
What entrepreneurial factors affect our sleep?
Oh, just in general. So I would say a number of entrepreneurial factors. The one, the high stress load. We want to create an environment where we're able to have high duality to our days. So we're diurnal creatures, meaning we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night. And as a result, what we'd like to see in history, for thousands of years, hunter-gatherers, it was all kind of preordained for us because the sun would be out and you would be active, kind of like, maybe the Amish nowadays or something. You've got only a certain amount of time. It's such a good productivity hack. Like, oh, the sun's going down and then we're done. And then once we're done, then it's kind of down regulation, regulatory practices. You sit by the fire maybe, and you would
the orange light, right?
Orange light, infrared rich light, very calming to the nervous system, not just from a ambiance perspective, but biologically, because we know that it's more supportive of producing more melatonin at night. Now, if we are more upregulated, and many people are entrepreneurs, they're kind of not unplugging. And so they're on their phones, they're on laptops, there's kind of no real clear boundaries. That inability to have that down regulation in the evening, we need that refractory period. And so if we don't have, it's kind of like that, what comes up must go down. That relates to, from diabetic perspective, from glucose, we know that that's going to be important. You want to create kind of harmony. And we want that with our workload and stress load as well. So I do
smooth out the curve. I know what you mean now. Gotcha.
That curve.
You want to
exactly.
get rid of the spikes. You want to get rid of the spikes and smooth out the curve. Yeah.
Rolling hills. Totally. And we want that with sleep too. We want to have this environment where we can activate parasympathetic response kind of on demand when we need to. Now, I do think that's where wearables have been kind of helpful for a number of people, and especially entrepreneurs, because a lot of the people I work with are entrepreneurs. And so the wearables can help us with things like HRV, and HRV is a great metric of, heart rate variability, great metric of our nervous system or reflection. And it can help us see like, oh, are we trending in more of a sympathetic tone, a stressed, kind of state? Or are we in a parasympathetic tone? And how can we develop more of that? And there's things that you can do to develop that.
So there's a lot of natural or even lifestyle changes we can make too to improve that.
Totally, exactly. And I would say often how I help people with this is from a framework around circadian rhythm entrainment. And circadian rhythm entrainment is really interesting because we can use that as a frame for all of these things. I know before we hit record, we're kind of waxing on about how the environment can help support our sleep. And that's what we can do for entrepreneurs. We can do that for, poker players and what have you. And what that looks like is that if we just are informed by nature, by the rhythms of nature of what to be doing and when, it kind of takes out some of the guesswork. But you'll often see that doesn't fit in the traditional lifestyle of an entrepreneur of how they might be managing themselves right now. So they can look to this. So what that looks like is the most important Zeitgeber or time giver for your circadian rhythm is light dark. So it's the heaviest weight to the strength of your circadian rhythm. And so what that would look like is starting your day with bright shots of light. I was showing you that
like real light. You're talking sunlight here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Physically getting outside. I just moved to this new house and I can push back the huge like sliding doors. And so I'm talking to you right now and I'm getting natural light. And this is helpful. We know not just from a nice to have, but some of the work out of Dr. Sachin Panda's work at the Salk Institute has found that the average person needs about an hour of time outside in the sun to be able to create sufficient melatonin in the evening. And so the is that when you get that bright light into your eyes and on your skin, that helps support serotonin production. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. So you need that kind of pathway to support getting great sleep in the evening. But people aren't doing that, or they'll say, oh, I'm in a bright environment, no big deal, but they're behind windows. So that cuts out this whole full spectrum light. So this is where you got to physically get yourself outside.
Yeah, because the glass cuts the UV.
Exactly.
Out. Right.
Yeah. So if anyone's listening to this and like, what is this whole conversation? Like, so one thing you could do is get the My Circadian app. And the My Circadian app is really helpful because one, it can help you with understanding your Fitzpatrick score scale, like where you fall on this Fitzpatrick scale, which we were talking about beforehand. Right. And that has to do with your skin tone. And so how much light do you require based on your kind of natural makeup? And so with that, then you're going to be able to kind of create a custom environment based around geotagged where you live on the planet, because based on where you are, if you're in a northern latitude location or a southern latitude location, where, you know, what time of year it is, you're going to need different amounts of time to be outside. And it also depends on the quality of the light and the time of the day. So it becomes a real physics conversation, and it would really require like a lot to dive into it. But the basics are morning sunlight, you want to get outside.
So just to make clear, when you're referring to northern latitudes and southern, we're talking the northern hemisphere. For those who are in the southern hemisphere, it's reverse. Where you're more south, it's darker.
Exactly. That's a very important point. Yes. And so this is where this all gets very complicated, which is why these apps and what have you can really help, because you can become a bit of a detective. And all you need to do is do this for like a day or two, where you can hit the Lux button on there.
Right.
And you can measure the lux in your environment. And that will help show how most of us are in very dim environments by day, usually sub about 1,000 lux. Whereas we want to be getting thousands of lux outside. So summer day can get up to 100,000 lux, right?
So me working in the dark is not very effective, even though it feels like I can get a lot done.
Exactly. I know. And Blake's like this too. Like I've had to really kind of coerce him to, you know, get him outside and use him as an example of another fellow ADHD person. And yet the need to bring that out is you're going to start being really addicted to, or designed to be addicted to the sun. Get some of these feel good hormones and release to make sure that we're always out there as much as we can is the goal.
Well, and then now you're countering the whole thing about sun's bad for you, right? So we got to get over a little bit of that, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I know. That's a big one.
You mentioned earlier we're diurnal animals. So if you didn't use the word animals, I am.
Okay, good.
So active by day and inactive at night. Is that true for everyone?
Good question. So what we see, and we know this too for a number of reasons. So we are diurnal. Human beings are diurnal creatures. We're not nocturnal. We're not, there's many different types of subsets of ways that each creature, mammal, is designed. And as diurnal creatures, we are all designed to be active by day, at rest at night. Now, there can be...
we're designed to be, is what I got from them. Okay.
And so there's a bit of a sliding scale, because we know that some people might be more morning leaning, more evening leaning, but it still is tethered to that cycle. So it's still tethered to the rhythms of nature. And it's been that way for millions of years.
Gotcha.
What we know too is when people start deviating from that too markedly, like shift workers, we have lots of research that simply by being active in those wee hours of the morning when most people are sleeping, then we see all kinds of health issues crop up for them, unfortunately. And so now I don't mean to be saying that if someone else is listening and they're a shift worker, like certainly there are things that we can do to support. But it's just knowing
traditionally in the past, they would have had more.
Yeah. And that there are, you've got to be really dialed in. If you are a shift worker, you've got to really know this stuff. So I would especially say that those are the people that absolutely need to learn more of this, because we want to make sure you're kind of well-run, well-oiled machine on these topics.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Watching my dad doing 12-hour shifts, night and days, on and off. It was, he can never get a good sleep. And, the transition from day to night shift was always a painful one and vice versa. So,
Poor guy. Yeah, the rotating shifts are really a challenge because if you are going to be a shift worker, we can set up things if it's more of a lifestyle. So, you go in at midnight or whatever. That we can just make your way of living. But when we've got the ups and downs, that can be really challenging.
I can see where you optimize the scenario. Like I'm assuming you're not assuming. What I'm getting from you is you optimize the sleep based on the scenario, the situation of the person. So
yeah. And, you see that too for athletes, that might need to be hopping time zones and be performing suddenly like at their peak at whatever, 8 p.m. or something. These are challenging things. But what is interesting is there are things that we can do to help support that. And if someone's listening and is like also experiencing lots of time zone shifting, whether they're staying or traveling,
that's a big entrepreneurial thing, jumping time zones regularly.
Totally. So one app that I have everyone download is called the Time Shifter app, and it uses the same algorithm that NASA uses to keep its astronauts on time. Astronauts are, when they're shuttling through space, the sun is rising and setting every 90 minutes or so. Yeah, which is very confusing. So they take this very seriously to help them. So you can get something like that. And then there's also coming out, it's kind of being slowly dripped out. It's newer, but the same people have created something called the Shift Work app. And that one's also, so even though you're not traveling, you are kind of giving yourself social jet lag, it's known as. So you can get on a plane, jet lag.
So diurnal animals, different circadian rhythms now. So there's a lot of bullshit out there about circadian rhythms, and it's very confusing. So the circadian rhythm is our cycle for sleeping and waking and going back to sleep, right? Is it along the same as diurnals where it could be shifted right to left, or can it be changed?
Good question. Okay, so our circadian rhythm is this around a 24-hour cycle, and so it's circa, so around. And so this circa around 24 hours that we're all kind of synced up on from the rising and the setting of the sun. Now, sleep-wake cycle is a huge component and probably the most known component of circadian rhythm, kind of the impact or fallout of circadian health. But there are so many other things that many people might not realize until maybe you jump on a plane, go from New York to Hong Kong, and suddenly, for instance, things like digestion are now upside down. For things like, you're going to the bathroom at the totally upside down time that you normally are. Your energy, your hormones, a number of things just kind of spill out when your circadian health is kind of out of alignment. And what that looks like is this is all being directed by your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is kind of this master clock in your brain that acts as this conductor to trillions of other clocks in virtually every cell and organ in your body. And they're all kind of sensing, all these clocks in your body want to know what time it is, because when they know what time it is, they can do the thing that they need to do because they're all on their own kind of rhythms, whether it's the liver, the heart, the different things are doing different things at different times.
So you're saying, but the time of the sun cycle is what they're looking for.
So that is one of them. Exactly.
Okay.
The point that is the most important. So it's the highest weight is the.
Because you just said time. I just didn't want to think it's 1, 2, 3 p.m. One. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So light dark is one of the biggest things they're sensing. So, and the eyes are sensing this, but also the skin has photoreceptors. So getting a sense of what time it is, what to be doing when. But then, so light dark is a big aspect of that. Always start there is the recommendation from in training your circadian health. The next one though is temperature timing. So, what temperature is it in your environment? It should be dynamic. We would have in the past been sleeping outside. So when we would wake up, we would rise to sunlight and we would warm up in the environment. And then as it would, kind of the sun would set, you would experience this total drop in temperature. And that would be a cue. Oh, okay. I guess it's ready, time for bed. Not to mention seasonal temperature changes. So
that's why we need a colder room when we sleep.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And ideally kind of, if you can, having it kind of wind down beforehand too. So those hours beforehand, you're mimicking what would be happening in nature. So that's the temperature piece. Then meal timing is a huge one. And actually we've got more research pointing to questions on could meal timing be one of the more impactful ones for jet lag? Right. So that's new. That's newer research. And that's exciting because previously it wasn't really a lot of kind of biohackers or what have you would bring this in, but it wasn't as well validated. So, that's more news. But what you can do is be aware of when you look at your day, the breakdown of your meal timing, there's times when you're eating and there's times when you're fasting. And so we want to try to be thoughtful about that if you are jumping time zones, or if you've been, kind of all over the place with your sleep wake cycles and timing, and you want to try to bring things back, you want to more front load your caloric load than many people might. And that's one people kind of getting messed with is that, that whole stretch of time when everyone was doing intermittent fasting and skipping breakfast, which I was one of those people as well. Well, the problem was that was kind of pushing out a kind of delayed phase. And so that's telling the body that it's later of a time, and then you're eating later commonly. And so that's impacting your sleep quality. If people have apnea, then your apneas go way up if you eat later. There's all kinds of fallout and issues with the quality of that sleep too, but also the circadian timing. So meal timing is a big one. Then there's exercise timing, there's thought timing, drug timing, social timing. There's a number of other things.
So very simple is what you're saying.
Well, it's so interesting because it's such a puzzle because
and everyone's different, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing, like, people come our way and some, here's one of the most common things I get is people say, I'm so over waking up in the morning. I'm waking up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Like, help. I don't want this anymore. But the source point for their wake ups could be so varied depending on the person. So the source point for those wake ups, glucose, we're talking about diabetic. So glucose is a huge and very common one. So we do have a lot of people wearing CGMs. I'm wearing a CGM right now. And we can see, are we spiking, crashing throughout the course of the night? Is that causing some of those wake ups? But then we can look at other things. We can look at, are we changing around our bed and wake time a lot? Are we really stressed or depressed? As kind of cortisol rise.
Oh, yeah.
Really more talk about entrepreneurial struggles. I mean, even if they want to sleep, if they're dealing with lots of stressors and things on their shoulders, then they might be having a lot of that high cortisol in the early morning hours.
Because we're sleeping, but our brain is still processing the stress.
Exactly.
And throwing everything off balance is one thing I learned, but made a lot of sense to me.
Oh, totally. And that can be a real struggle because then it can kind of be this hamster wheel that we can often get caught in. Because now you're not sleeping enough and now you're more reactive and harder to manage stress. But the good news is there are always things we can do, but there are more things, so certain supplements or drugs or alcohol or THC can affect wake ups, the temperature in your space, the hormonal changes that we might be going through as we're aging. Health complications, there's a lot of things, but I hope it doesn't land as overwhelming. Instead, I'd hope for it to land as, if you're dealing with something, then we want to get to the source of it.
Well, that's what I'm getting. It might be complicated. It's like anything else, even business. In the end, what I'm hearing from you is there's something that's doable and it's fixable.
Yes.
If it can't be the perfect ideal scenario, you can optimize it so we get the best sleep possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's like anything else with my diabetic diagnosis, even my ADHD diagnosis, became a lifestyle change. So it sounds like we got to change our lifestyle as well for sleep, which you say is it's a skill we have to develop.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like this down regulation piece, that's something that can certainly take a lifetime. I'm continuing to work on that myself of how do we manage our stressors? How do we manage both on big things, especially as entrepreneurs? We want to, the sky's the limit thinking, but then also like, how do we respect our bodies and the need for kind of down and off? And so those are things we can bring in. We do things like kind of identifying like polyvagal theory. We can look at nervous regulation, HRV training, lots there, biofeedback, etc.
Man, we could be talking hours here because this is all phenomenal. And like I said, am I not wrong? But she knows her stuff and she can explain it very well. Even though we're biological. I understood that one.
Nailed it.
But like you pointed out, like ADHD brains, 25 to 50% of them have experienced some sort of sleep. You called it difficulty. What could be a disorder, could be apnea or whatnot. Stress load as an entrepreneur is a massive effect on our sleep. Probably, I would say one of the top ones is from my understanding and from my experience.
Yeah.
Because we bring, no matter what, our subconscious brings it to us at bedtime and still processes it unless you can clear it out. And the whole light, dark timing, body temp timing, meal timing, and exercise timing, that one I need to process more because it makes a lot of sense to me. And it's all about timing. Like for me, my bedtime routine is I need to read so much just to clear my head, but nothing work related. And if I got a worked up date, that has to be longer. So it can be something I've learned over the last little bit. And this whole timing thing makes a lot of sense to me because I know if I eat a big meal right before bed, I think your body's digesting all night. So it's not resting.
Exactly.
So stuff like that, no more snacking 2 to 3 hours before is kind of a rule. So the timing thing makes a lot of sense to me.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we've seen for meal timing, certainly you nailed it with the 2 to 3 hours being kind of the generalized recommendation. Now, from a kind of biohacking perspective, if you will, or wearable data, one of the things we are seeing, for instance, out of Whoop, they're releasing a study that's showing they looked at the difference between 2 hours before bed having your last bite of food and 4 hours before bed having your last bite of food. And it appears that the 4 hour group was, far superior in many aspects of health and well-being. Right. And so we're seeing things like 4, 5, even 6 hours before bed having benefits for people for that last bite of food. And if people have heard of like Brian Johnson, who's kind of making waves, right? So spending lots of money to try to reverse, his age essentially.
Longevity. Yep.
Yep, exactly. So he's made some, waves in this conversation where he has his last bite of food around 11 a.m. So not saying that everyone needs to do that at all.
Yeah.
But
and the type of food you're eating too. Does digest
100%.
quicker, slower? There's lots.
There's
So,
lots.
Mollie, where can we find you and information on your services? And I believe you got a program.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find everything at sleepisaskill.com. And there people can take a sleep assessment to get some information sent back to them right away on things that they can do to support their sleep. We have a cohort. Now we're moving this cohort to kind of more of a self-paced model so that people can kind of go as they like, but then they'll have options for monthly calls to come and join in and get support so that, you're kind of not on your own with this. And then we also have a podcast. So every week we give out lots of information with different experts, in the area of sleep and beyond. To support your sleep journey. And because, there's a lot of different reasons that people come our way, whether to optimize their sleep or they're really struggling with their sleep. So sleep disorders or what have you. So no matter where you are on that scale, we can help support you there.
Thanks, Mollie, for your time and your knowledge today. And you, the listener, it is possible for us to get good sleep. Try out some of these different ideas and let's make it a task to master our new skill called sleep. And let me know what changes you are going to make in your sleep. Email me at André@theimpulsivethinker.com. I would love to hear your new ideas. And Mollie, thanks again.
Yes, thank you. This was a pleasure.
And to you, the listeners, thanks again for learning with me. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.